stop the world. Cut.
No, the producer isn't quibbling with the way the world is turning. The overall setup is not quite right to fit his needs for a particular film. That's one big advantage of Solarama. We can literally control the elements, on Earth or in space, for motion picture purposes. After a conference and a change of setup, the producer is ready for another take. This time from the point of view of the moon. Or perhaps the script calls for some type of vehicle traveling through space. Solarama can achieve that too, creating a realistic effect. Note the depth, the perspective possible with this studio technique.
I have no recollection of it myself, but my mom always used to love telling the story of the first time she took me to see a movie in the theater. It was Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. I guess it must have been a special rescreening or something, because obviously I wasn't alive when that movie first came out, but she would laugh every time she talked about how as a 2-year-old, I was bouncing up and down in the seat almost the entire time, pretending to ride horses and shoot bow and arrows and have sword fights and all that. I was absolutely captivated by the experience as a toddler. I was in Sherwood Forest. I was in Nottingham. I was there, living through the things being projected on that screen. The first such cinematic experience I do remember was when a few years later I saw Return of the Jedi on the silver screen. And while hopefully I was a bit more self-contained than when I was 2, I still remember being immersed and enthralled by the action, by the alien worlds, and by the entire delicious fantasy. Lightsaber battles and Jedi powers, and of course the speeder bike scene on Endor, which blew my little elementary school mind. I mean, I was transported. It was, in a way, transcendent of everyday life. And then in the never-ending story, it too was filled with fantastic creatures and lands and adventure and all the rest, and of course the Empress character, who as a 7-year-old boy, I thought was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. I wanted to marry her. She was my first crush. Although now as an adult, I must admit I'm a little disturbed by how much makeup they put on a little girl like that, but hey, I was 7 at the time. And like so many of us, movies continued to play a role in my life for years to come, sculpting my imagination, taking me new places, introducing new concepts, new characters, new dreams. Until eventually, around almost a decade ago now, the whole concept of, quote, theater began to take on a very different and rather diabolical tone. And so now here we are, more and more of us coming to the extremely disturbing and disorienting realization that we have been living our entire lives being immersed in, captivated by, sculpted by, all sorts of theater on all sorts of levels. Most of which have been going on outside the padded seats of the cinema. That little clip of the flapping tarp on the space station in the intro, by the way, that's from Skylab, the second mission in July of 1973. Which is kind of crazy. This is only a year after the Apollo missions wrapped up, but that flapping tarp thing is the, quote, Mylar solar shield that the first crew had to install on Skylab after a panel supposedly broke off when it was initially put into orbit, and so the interior of the little space station was getting too hot, so basically they tied a big gold reflective tarp on the outside to reflect the sunlight and keep it cool enough. But, yeah. That footage is supposedly a fly-around inspection of the space station before docking, and somehow, at an Earth orbit of 270 miles up, you can see the thing flapping in the wind like crazy. So, okay, there's one more fun little tidbit for the people who still scoff at the idea that NASA has been faking everything all along, and maybe most of you guys had seen that before, I don't know, but it was new to me, so I wanted to share it. Overall, Skylab kind of feels like the NASA equivalent of the Star Wars Holiday Special to me. Like, they first put it out thinking that it was this awesome idea, and then shortly after realized what a horrific dud it was, and wanted to try and erase it from the annals of history. But anyway, the use of theater to influence and indoctrinate the minds of men and women stretches back into ancient times, of course, when the Greeks championed the use of drama in their culture to spread mythological themes and beliefs to the mass population. And it's never stopped, all the way up to the present day. Only the stage has taken on more forms than most people want to imagine possible. Because now the theater is all around us, not just in what we recognize as entertainment or, quote, art, but in science, education, politics, news. It's everything. It is somewhat like the film Inception, except it's like movies within movies within movies, and the entire grasp of concrete reality just gets blurrier and blurrier with every passing year. I mean, for example, Logan Paul just dropped his Flat Earth mockumentary finally, where he punked the entire Flat Earth topic. He punked the 2018 Flat Earth Conference, and he punked the publicity-chasing promoter of that conference by pretending to get punked himself by his own friend, who convinces him to become a flat earther, for like a day. And it's kind of this sick sort of genius satire, where the whole thing is like this big fake reality show, where Paul willingly plays the role of the idiot dupe, and of course everyone in his entourage, including the fake girlfriend, was in on the whole production the whole time, duh. So it's kind of like he's lampooning himself, but he's also not. What he's really doing is just laughing all the way to the bank, as he has been for years, and in a way, after watching it, or I guess more accurately, I skimmed the majority of it and then skipped to the ridiculous ending, but I was almost struck by the thought that it's almost like it was a way of trying to redeem himself after the whole Suicide Forest debacle. Really, because anyone with a lick of intelligence should be able to walk away from watching the whole thing and realize that it was all a stunt from start to finish, and that Logan was willfully playing the part of the feeble-minded idiot who was seduced by conspiracy theories, and so in that sense, I'm guessing that he should be recognized by the mainstream media as almost doing penance for his previous social media sins, by way of using his own self-masturbatory egotistical persona as the Trojan horse to get into the Flat Earth convention and make a total mockery of the entire thing. But anyhow, speaking of satire, and speaking of Greek theater, did you know that the term satire is derived from the ancient Greek form of plays known as satyr plays? I came across this not long ago and it was kind of fascinating. These satyr plays were considered to be somewhat in between the classical Greek tragedy and Greek comedy. But basically it was just a bunch of male chorus singers who were dressed up as satyrs, or satyrs, or however you want to say it. Yes, just like the goat-legged god Pan. And they ran around on stage acting boisterous and lewd and oftentimes wearing giant exaggerated phalluses. So that's right, dick jokes go all the way back to the ancient mystery schools too. I mean, what do you know? Interesting to stop and then note that Logan Paul's trip, quote, to the edge and back concluded with him running around Denver in the buff and making dick jokes about himself. Nothing new under the sun, once again. But indeed, okay, Ridley Scott, the famous director of Alien and Blade Runner and everything, he just made this big-budget 4-minute film/commercial for Hennessy, the cognac company. And it's called The Seven Worlds, where each world is supposed to represent a different one of the 7 flavor notes of this famous liquor. And it's sort of interesting for several reasons. One being how it illustrates the fact that we now live in a day and age where we can all see that it's quite possible to fake every single effect needed to show things like levitating liquids in zero gravity, or putting actors in front of dazzling space backgrounds, faking vehicles and alien planets and everything else. But the idea that they could be faking the quote-unquote real space footage is still seen as ridiculous. But not only that, of course, this 4-minute sci-fi odyssey alcohol ad also has to be full of esoteric and occult symbolism as well. And that, of course, is ultimately what this movie of a million movies is all about. The Luciferian myth that is at the core of all myths. And I know that for so many people, even so many Christians, this is still such a hard thing for them to wrap their heads around. Even though the Bible makes it undeniably clear that this is the case. The lie, the great deception that the scriptures warn us about, is all about mankind becoming our own God. I mean, that's it. And you see it playing itself out more and more all around us all the time, where people in the spheres of even business and industry and the tech sector, as it were, and all kinds of other seemingly, non-spiritual arenas are buying into and promoting these concepts of shaping our own reality and mindfulness and other such new age concepts and buzzwords.
I interviewed hundreds of individuals who are at the peak of their career and at the peak of their life. They are crushing it at work with money, but they're also healthy, well, successful, and enjoying life. And none of them ever credit their education or hard work for how they got there. Rather, as I go deeper with them, what they all talk about is to be able to access certain altered states of mind that some people dismiss as being spiritual. But the fact of the matter is, human beings are not taught how to tap into altered states of awareness to make an impact on the world. And in this masterclass on Mind Valley, on the concept of bending reality, I go deep into that formula. You see, the people who tell you that it's about hard work, that it's about what you know, they are addressing what is the mass of the population who are at level 1 awareness, but there's a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. And the higher up you go, the more it has to do with your inner state of being, the more it has to do with being able to access certain altered states that produce the effect as if you were able to bend reality. When you read the books of some of the most remarkable people in the world, you find that this phenomenon comes up over and over again. Read Walter Isaacson's story of Steve Jobs. Twice in that book, he referenced Steve Jobs' ability to bend reality. Read the stories of Richard Branson and how he lives his life in a state of flow. So for the longest time, we have taken spirituality out of work. We have taken spirituality out of entrepreneurship. We have dismissed spirituality as being bogus or woo-woo. But the fact of the matter is, today, if you want to succeed at what you do and succeed at life at the same time, you got to tap into a spiritual core. Now, if you can accept any model of reality, why not choose one that suggests that you can literally bend reality with your mind? Think about how powerful that would be.
But from the stone amphitheaters of ancient Greece to the Shakespearean stage, to the silver screen, and television, mass media, and the internet, etc., we're now on the precipice of having this all-encompassing sci-fi horror picture show get even more immersive and captivating than ever before, thanks to VR technology and augmented reality. Recently, the YouTube channel Disrupt made a fascinating video of a little experiment the guy did where he spends a week solid, non-stop in virtual reality. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely interesting and worth checking out because it touches upon so many elements. But not only does he do various virtual activities having to do with being in space, or he even says he feels like his apartment is like a little spaceship after several days, and he even watches a SpaceX launch and a virtual hangout and all sorts of stuff. But of course, there's also lots of New Age spirituality in the mix. You know, he's meditating and goes to a virtual yoga class, and it was funny, one guy in the class even mentions flat Earth, and the instructor tells him to be quiet. But overall, there's a lot in there just talking about how spending so much time in VR basically is like this altered state of consciousness. Just kind of scary. I mean, it's not surprising, but it kind of says a lot. By the end of the week, he's like super ready to take off the headset and just go outside and feel the sunshine and everything. But ultimately, he thinks VR and augmented reality is a good thing and can be, quote, whatever you want it to be. Which again is the theme of the whole centuries-spanning movie. You can make the reality you want to make. You can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do. You can reach the stars. I mean, even Mary Poppins, man. I don't know why, but the other day something made me think about Mary Poppins, because that was another movie I saw a bunch of times as a kid. And I mean, it's safe and, quote, family-friendly, right? But dude, for whatever reason, I suddenly thought about Mary Poppins and thought to myself, wait, Mary Poppins was a straight-up witch with a prim and proper English accent, you know?
Everything is possible.
Even the impossible. Off we go.
Everything is possible, even the impossible. And I know that probably seems like silly, innocent Disney tripe to a lot of people. But that really is the essence of the Luciferian Mystery Babylon false gospel, right there. It's really just do what thou wilt, cartoonified. And that is why it's so sad and so frustrating that so many folks in the church still dig in their heels and cling to things like the false Copernican paradigm and the broader spectrum of occult scientism overall. It's not because the question of the shape of the earth is itself so terribly important. It's because the matter of believing what the Bible says about the entire world being subjected to a great deception that is terribly important. It's important because this is where the real war is taking place, the real, quote, battle for heaven and earth, as it were. It's in our hearts, in our minds, and in our imaginations. It's hard to exit the theater. We all like the theater. We all like certain aspects of the tragedy and the comedy, and even the satyr plays. We all like to imagine that we can become whatever we wish, that we can manifest our own dreams, sculpt our own reality, and be our own saviors. And that is what we've been seduced by all along. But in the end, it's a horrible, deadly lie. What we really need is Jesus, the eternal high priest, the true Messiah, the Lamb of God who sits upon the throne. And that message is the ultimate spoiler, as it were. It's the reason that when we talk about Jesus and what he's done for us, it infuriates the Gnostics and the New Agers and the quantum mystics and the transhumanists and all the rest. Because we're ruining the movie. We're tarnishing the fantasy. And it's also the reason that topics like Flat Earth trigger so many Christians who are still clinging to the notions of trying to appeal to the warped wisdom of this fallen world in order to defend the Bible and defend the existence of God. Because we're exposing the terrifying reality of the satanic theater in general, and they don't want to believe that they're still enthralled by it, still trying to marry the gospel of Jesus with humanistic science fiction delusions. Everything that the world promises is made to look so enticing and desirable and exciting and enthralling and made to seem like the most amazing movie that you could possibly get lost inside of. But in the end, it's really just one big dick joke. One big special effects laden ruse designed to punk everyone who wants to keep on believing in the fantasy of the idolatry of man.